Hello everybody, let's do some reading. Would you like to? Thank you. Now let's get reading! Welcome back. I might do a different intro every time. So today we're going to read Mr. Messy by Roger Hargreaves again. And if you enjoyed the last video, which was Mrs. Greedy, like Little Miss Greedy, I'm a little messy. But anyways, today we are reading Mr. Messy. He's messy. I'm sure his house is messy. Guys, I'm sure his house is very messy, especially his bed, since he never likes to clean it, probably because he likes stuff being messy. Mummy's behind the camera and she's laughing and cracking her up. Cracking her up into egg yolk. Anyways, let's get reading. Oh, I just saw the page and it looks like one of the pages and it has yellow. Mr. Messy was the messiest person you've ever met in your whole life. He looked messy because he was messy in everything he did. You could always tell where Mr. Messy has been because he left a trail of messy fingerprints wherever he'd been. Oh yes, Mr. Messy was messy by name, messy by nature. That's a lot of messies. If you can't keep track of how many messies I say, that would be amazing. And tell me a number. Mr. Messy lived in a particular messy looking house. Oh dear, all the windows are broken. The paint was peeling, the windows were broken, there were tiles missing from the roof, the flower beds were overgrown with weeds, the garden gate was off its hinges. Oh dear, dearie me. And had Mr. Messy cut the grass in his garden lately? Yet not, he likes it being messy. One morning, Mr. Messy woke up in his messy bed. And scratched, got up, cleaned his teeth, leaving the top of the toothpaste, had his breakfast, spilling cornflakes all over the floor, and then set out for a walk, tripping over a bush he'd left lying in the garden 2 weeks before. Oh my gosh. Before there was a wood behind Mr. Messy's messy house with the messy garden, and that's where he went for his walk. It was a particularly large wooden wood with lots and lots of trees, and it took Mr. Messy a long time to walk through it, but he didn't really mind it because he felt like walking that morning. So he walked and walked right through the woods until he came to the other side. And do you know what he found on the other side of the wood? Mr. Messy found the neatest, prettiest looking little cottage that he had ever seen. Wow, you should live in that house now. It had a lovely little garden with a stream running through the middle of it. That must be calming. There was a man in the garden, clipping the hedge. He looked up as Mr. Messy approached. Good morning. Hi, Mr. Messy, said Mr. Messy. I can see that, replied the man, looking him up and down. I'm Mr. Tidy. And I'm Mr. Neat, said another man appearing out of the house. Tidy and neat, said Mr. Tidy. Neat and tidy, said Mr. Neat. We're in business together, explained Mr. Tidy, and the people who own this house have asked us to do some work for them. What sort of work? Asked Mr. Messy. We make things nice and neat, said Mr. Neat. Tidy things up, asked Mr. Tidy. added Mr. Tidy. "Perhaps we could come along and do some work for you," said Mr. Neat, looking at Mr. Messy, who was looking even messier than usual that particular morning. "But I don't want things neat and tidy," said Mr. Messy, looking downright miserable at the thought of it. "Nonsense," said Mr. Tidy. "Fiddlesticks," said Mr. Messy. Said Mr. Neat, but said Mr. Messy. "Come along," said Mr. Neat. "Off we go," said Mr. Tidy. But, said Mr. Messy. "But nothing," said Mr. Neat. And bundling him into their van, which was parked behind the house, off they went to Mr. Messy's house at the other side of the wood. The van says neat and tidy. "Good heavens!" said Mr. Neat when he saw where Mr. Messy lived. "Good gracious!" added Mr. Tidy. "This is the messiest house I have ever seen in all my born days," they both said together at the same time. "Better do something about it," said Mr. Neat, and before Mr. Messy could open his mouth, the two of them were brushing here and there about Mr. Messy's house. Mr. Neat hoed and mowed and pruned and snipped and clipped and cleared and dug and made the garden look neater than it had ever looked before. Mr. Tidy cleaned and trimmed and rubbed and painted and mended and made the outside of Mr. Messy's house look tidier than it had ever looked before. Then they both went inside their house. "Good heavens," said Mr. Neat for the second time that morning. "Good gracious," said Mr. Tidy for the second time that morning. And then they set about cleaning the house from top to bottom. They brushed and swept and polished and scrubbed and made the inside of the house look neater and tidier than it had ever looked before. "There we are," said Mr. Tidy. "All finished," said Mr. Neat. "Tidy and neat," said Mr. Tidy. "Neat and tidy," said Mr. Neat. Mr. Messy just didn't know what to say. Then they both looked at Mr. Messy. "Are you thinking of time thinking?" Mr. Neat said to Mr. Tidy. "Precisely," replied Mr. Tidy. "What we're both thinking," they said together to Mr. Messy, "is that you look much too messy to live in a neat and tidy house like this." "But," said Mr. Messy. But whatever Mr. Messy said was no use, and Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy whisked him off to the bathroom upstairs. It had been the messiest room in the house, but now, of course, it was neat as a new pin. Then Mr. Neat got hold of one of Mr. Messy's arms, and Mr. Tidy got hold of the other arm, and they both picked him up and put him straight into the bath. Mr. Messy wasn't used to having baths. Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy washed and brushed and cleaned and scrubbed and combed Mr. Messy until he didn't look like Mr. Messy at all. In fact, he looked the opposite of messy. He looked at himself in the mirror. "You know what I'm going to have to do now," he said in a rather fierce voice. Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy looked worried. "What are you going to have to do?" they asked Mr. Messy. "I'm going to have to change my name," said Mr. Messy. And then he chuckled, and Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy chuckled. And then Mr. Messy laughed, and Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy laughed. And then they all laughed together and became the best of friends. And that really is the end of the story, except to say that if you're a messy sort of person, you might have a visit from two people. And you know what they're called, don't you? Mr. Mess. Well, like not Mr. Messy or Mrs. Messy. Mr. Tidy and Mr. Neat. Really, if you really enjoyed reading this book with me called Mr. Messy, please press that like button, hit that subscribe button, comment down below on Facebook or Twitter what any other books you want me to, I always say this, that read. I'll see you guys all next time. Bye. I am all messy. Thanks for watching.